Attendance. I believe we have a quorum. Let me see. First order of business, we have two bills with requests from the patrons to go by for the day. One of them is House Bill 772. The other bill is House Bill 471. Those bills will go by for the day without objection. Next up, we have a request from Delegate Torian to strike, let's see, House Bill 819, and that is a recorded vote. So moved. Right.
No motion.
Yep. Second. And have to cast your vote on the voting machine, please. All right. House Bill 819 is stricken. All right, Delegate Torian, do you want to start off?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Chairman, from the outset, let me share with you that the three bills that I have before your committee comes as a result of recommendations from the Virginia Minority Business Commission that we've been meeting over the last couple of years. And so which one would you like for me to start with, Mr. Chairman? 814. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. The Department of Small Business and Supply Diversity Agency, the Agency of Procurement Enhancement Plans, directs the Department of Small Business and Supply Diversity to annually review and provide feedback on state agencies' plans to enhance procurement from small women-owned and minority-owned businesses. The bill directs the Department of Small Business and Supply Diversity to annually review the state agencies' plans to enhance procurement from small women and minority-owned businesses. The bill implements a recommendation from JLARC, from the JLARC's report on SBSD, which found that SBSD was not providing meaningful feedback on state agencies' plans to enhance procurement from SWAM businesses. The policy proposal was developed by the Virginia Small Business Commission, and there is no fiscal impact, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Delegate Torian. Are there any of the members have a question for the patron? Okay, are there members of the audience who would like to speak in favor of the bill? Please, state your name, please, and association.
Mr. Chairman and members of the subcommittee, my name is Gwendolyn Davis, and I am the chair of an organization that's grassroots called Equipping Businesses for Success Institute in Hampton Roads. I'm also the Minority Women Business Enterprise Administrator for Portsmouth Public Schools. We support House Bill 814 and thank Delegate Torian for introducing the measure. Our organization has worked for the past 16 years with 4 different administrations, from Mr. Kane to Mr. Northam, to increase opportunities for minority and women-owned small businesses in state procurement contracting. With the help of the Virginia Legislative Black Caucus, the administrators, and the General Assembly, we've seen expenditures for goods and services to minority and women business enterprises go from 1.50% or $75 million statewide to over $3.2 billion. This would not be possible if we didn't have this type of review, and it's desperately needed. So we are excited about what we're seeing in the Commonwealth of Virginia in terms of increased procurement opportunities for women and minority-owned businesses, and we just hope that this committee will endorse this proposal and send it to the full committee.
All right. Thank you. Yes, sir.
Just one minor comment. My name is Justin Brown with JLARC, and just to echo the delegate's point here, the real key here is there's already something in place to require agencies to do these plans and to put time and effort into them, and this really closes the loop on that to require this agency to actually do something with the plans that are put together.
I think that's important, right? Yeah. Thanks, sir. Does any of the members have a question for the patron? All right. Delegate Torian, you have the last word.
I'm fine, Mr. Chairman. Thank you.
Mr. Chairman,
Entertain a motion. Yes, sir.
I move to report.
A second? All right. We have a proper motion and a second. All those can indicate their vote on the electronic voting machine. All right. Bill reports 8-0, and I think your next bill, Delegate Torin, is 815.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. House Bill 815 is a mentorship program. This bill sets up a mentorship program, pilot program to start up women and minority-owned businesses. It will be a volunteer program. Florida and Pennsylvania are two examples of other states that currently have SWAM minority protege programs in place. These programs aim to strengthen small businesses and enhance their ability to compete for procurement opportunities. This policy proposal was a key recommendation that came out of the Virginia Minority Business Commission, and, Mr. Chairman, it has no physical impact.
Thank you, Delegate Torin. Does any of the members have a question for the patron? Any of the folks in the audience like to speak in support? Okay. Your name, please?
Mr. Chairman and members of the subcommittee, Heather Derflinger with the Virginia Bankers Association, and we are supportive of House Bill 815. Many of our member banks are actively engaged with minority and women-owned businesses and would be a logical partner as a mentor for this program. We thank Delegate Torian for his leadership on this issue. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay.
Mr. Chairman and members of the committee, we support this bill. Thank you.
Thank you. Does anybody like to speak in opposition? Right. Anything from the committee? Delegate Torian, you have the last word.
I certainly hope that the committee will look favorably upon HB 815, Mr. Chairman.
Mr. Chairman,
We have a motion?
move to report.
All right. Members, we have a proper second and a proper motion and a second. Members will cast their vote on the electronic voting device. All right, we report 8-0. Delegate Torin, I believe you have one more. Well, I can't find it.
Mr. Chairman,
820.
820, yes, sir. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Chairman, basically what this bill does is to just codify what has been done already. So let me just share some thoughts with you. House Bill 820, the disparity study. This bill directs SBSD to conduct a business disparity study every 5 years. The study will examine state spending with women and minority-owned businesses in the state contracting and will strive to identify the gaps between the women and minority-owned businesses that are available in Virginia's economy and those that are involved in state contracting. The study will occur every 5 years in order to look at Virginia's progress over time. Other states, such as Indiana and New York, already have these study requirements in code. Virginia has conducted these disparity studies in the past. This policy proposal was developed by the Virginia Minority Business Commission, and, Mr. Chairman, there's no physical impact in the upcoming biennium. And basically, we're simply putting in code, codifying what we're already doing every 5 years.
Thank you, Delegate Torian. Any of the members have a question for the patron? Any folks in the audience like to speak in favor of the bill?
Mr. Chairman, members of the committee, my name is Gwendolyn Davis, and we wholeheartedly support this bill. If it were not for the disparity studies, we would not know the impact that state procurement contracting was having on women and minority-owned businesses in the Commonwealth of Virginia. And if our state is going to be open for business, it needs to be open for all businesses. And the only way to see that is through these disparity studies. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you for your testimony. Anybody speak in opposition? The chair will entertain a motion.
Mr. Chairman, move to report.
All right, any further discussion? All right, we have a motion properly seconded to report House Bill 820. The members will indicate their vote on the electronic voting machine. Close the roll. Bill reports out 8-0.
Mr. Chairman, thank you all so much, committee. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Delegate
very
Torrey.
much.
Delegate Davis.
Yes, sir. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. The bill I have in front of you today is House Bill 381. House Bill 381 is it references a very important piece of legislation we have done recently, the data privacy bill. When we passed that bill, we unfortunately left a little bit of a loophole. You see, the bill basically said that if someone requests the deletion of their information, that entity had to delete it. However, many entities, they buy data from third parties. So if you were to request your information be deleted, they could delete it. The next quarter, they buy a whole bunch of information again. Your information happens to be part of that data, and now they have it again, and they've stuck it out there for sale. What this does, if you look on line 51, it just says a controller that's obtained the data about a consumer from a source other than the consumer shall be deemed in compliance with the request to delete such data pursuant to that section by opting the customer out of the processing of that data for targeted advertising, sale, or profiling. What this basically means, Mr. Chairman, is when someone calls to have their information deleted, they expect it shall be never used going forward again. That is not the case in status quo. This makes it the case, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Delegate Davis. Any of the members have a question for the patron? All right. Does any folks in the audience like to speak in favor of the bill or against?
Good afternoon, Mr. Chair, members of the committee. I'm Chris White with the Vector Corporation. I'm here on behalf of Relics. We're the parent company of LexisNexis. I think Delegate Davis explained what the bill does. It's a common sense measure to ensure that a consumer's request to have their data deleted is meaningful. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hello, Mr. Chairman, members of the subcommittee. Dana Wiggins with the Virginia Poverty Law Center. We really appreciate Delegate Davis bringing the bill, mostly because we hope that this particular piece of legislation will help ensure that what consumers expect to happen actually happens. If they make a request to delete, they don't want to have to do it again and again and again, and this will help make that a possibility. Thank you so much.
All right, thank you. All right. Any of the members have a question for the patron?
Ready for a motion?
I'm going to let Delegate Davis get the last word. Right?
Well, I do want to say something. One, because I made Attorney General Miaras jump through hoops to get a ruling. I may sound like I'm talking about, but I just regurgitated what he said in his letter verifying it. So I wanted to make it worth his time to having done that. So thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Don't talk yourself out of a bill.
No. I just had to mention the work he did.
Delegate Wright, do you have a motion?
I move to report.
We have a motion to report and seconded. All those members indicate their vote on the electronic voting machine. We can close the roll. The bill reports 8-0.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Delegate Brewer.
Hello, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. Which bill would you like me to take first?
Well, let's see. Let me see. Okay, we got a choice. I'll tell you what, let's go with 474.
Yes, sir. I will be brief because I think brevity is an art form. Mr. Chair, members of the committee, House Bill 474 clarifies building and fire officials certified to perform fire inspections by the Board of Housing and Community Development are not required to also be certified through the Department of Professional and Occupational Regulation. This is not my certain content subject area, but I do believe I have a phone a friend behind me that can explain any more in-depth conversation on this topic.
All right. Please come forward, sir. You can state your name.
Mr. Chairman, good afternoon. My name is Ron Clements. I'm the building official for Chesterfield County, and I'm here representing the Virginia Building and Code Officials Association.
Thank you. Welcome.
When this statute first went in, it was really geared towards contractors that perform third-party sprinkler inspections. And Department of Professional Occupational Regulation decided that this applies to everybody that performs sprinkler inspections, including us, even though we're already certified by the Board of Housing through Title 36 authority that's granted to the Board of Housing. We reached out to the Department of Housing and Community Development for some assistance. They reached out to DPOR, tried to work it out between agencies. That was unsuccessful. DHCD reached out to the Attorney General's office for an opinion. That was unsuccessful. They wouldn't even give an opinion on it. So we're before you today trying to resolve this issue so we don't have to be double certified. And I can assure you the certification we go through is very robust. There's actually up to 3 different certifications that we're required to get, multiple tests. So it's not that we're trying not to be certified. It's just we don't need to be certified by DPOR when we're already certified by the Board of Housing. Be happy to answer any questions.
Thank you. Any of the members have a question for the witness or the patron? All right. Any folks in the audience who would like to speak to the bill? Let's see. All right. All right. All right.
Mr. Chairman, Ed Rhodes with the Virginia chapter of the American Fire Sprinkler Association.
Welcome.
My members are torn on this bill because we've had a couple of conversations with a former fire marshal and also with the executive director of the Board of Contractors. They're basically saying that this bill is not needed because the authority for the building code officials is in Title 36 and the fire marshals are in Title 27, and this code is in Title 54. There's never been any mention of the fire marshals or the building code officials in the construction and licensing code. So they feel it's not needed, but you know, if it's your pleasure to pass it, they can live with it. That's kind of a iffy situation, yeah. But basically they don't feel it's needed because if they come and inspect anything, they can't touch anything because they're not certified in the sprinkler components. And you need to remember, these aren't residential sprinklers we're talking about. We're talking about these things up here, the commercial sprinklers.
Yep. Thank you, Mr. Rhodes.
Yes, sir. Thank you.
All right. Delegate Brewer.
Final word?
Final word?
Clean up, less government. I hope the subcommittee will report the bill.
Yep. All right. Chair will entertain a motion. We got a motion to report and a second. All right. All those in favor can indicate their vote on the electronic voting machine. All right, close the roll. The bill reports 8-0. Delegate Brewer. Next up is, let's see, 1019.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, members of the subcommittee. House Bill 1019 actually was brought to me in conversation with DGS. This will expand the existing authority to state departments, agencies, and institutions to convey easements in between property owned by the Commonwealth by allowing them to convey easements to telecommunication companies, telecommunication lines, including broadband. So this is just going to reduce a little bit of red tape in regards to the huge broadband deployment and changes we may be doing along the way in the next couple of years. And this will just allow them to ease into being able to do this without any overburdensome regulation. I believe someone here from DGS is here to speak to that as well.
Thank you. And we have some testimony.
Mr. Chair, members of the committee, we want to thank Delegate Brewer for carrying this bill for DGS. This expands what we already have related to utilities to include telecommunications. Thank you for your consideration.
Great. Thank you. Is there any other testimony from the audience? Members have any questions for the patron? I'll entertain a motion. Move to motion to report.
Mr. Chair, move to report.
All right, that's a second motion to report. Do we have a second?
Second.
All righty. right, the members will indicate their vote on the electronic voting device. All right, you can close the roll. That bill reports out 7-1. Delegate Brewer.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, members
Very
of the
good.
subcommittee.
Thank you. All right, next up, Delegate Rome.
Let's keep the good times rolling here, Mr.
Amen
Chairman.
to that.
All right, so for HB 610, I got two bills in front of you. This first one has an amendment. There is a typo in the amendment that I just want to also just note so that we can correct. Next to Romanet 1, where it says in unincorporated church, that should just be in incorporated church. The other unincorporated one is fine, but this one just needs to be changed. So with that, Mr. Chair, if you'd like to adopt the amendment, and then I'll present the bill.
All right, all those in favor, say aye. Aye, the amendment's before us.
All right. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you to the members of the subcommittee. HB 610 is a bill that would allow for families to gain interment rights at family cemeteries and burial and use of historic cemeteries by proving kinship of those previously buried in the cemetery. I bring this bill to you because in my district there are 3 historic African American and Native American cemeteries which have been sold to private buyers, and the descendants have lost their ability to access the cemeteries and put their family members to rest with their ancestors. This is a very common issue that comes up with heirs properties in particular. And so we've had some revamps of heirs property in the code in the last few years and everything. This is one of those other heirs property kind of cleanup issues that we really are trying to get at here. So the bill will address the ability for family members to prove kinship so that they may be able to gain these rights to place remains in a specific location for use as a final resting place or memorial. Many family cemeteries have changed owners over years and decades, sometimes without families' consent. The legislation broadens the types of documents able to be used to prove kinship to non-official documentation, such as in many cases those official documents have been lost over decades or no longer exist. The court would still, over decades or longer. The court would still need to assess the documents and deem them reliable. And we've got some advocates here from the Coalition to Save Historic Thoroughfare who will also be happy to speak today.
Thank you, Delegate. First, I think any of the members have a question about that. And I have a question. I live out in the country, all right, and a lot of farms out there, and a lot of them, are members of my family, as a matter of fact, but we have lots of very old cemeteries on there that are, still kept up. You see the markers out in the field. Usually there's a couple of cedar trees around them and a fence. But that family has been off the property for typically sometimes 100 years or. And so I know now the law, I think, currently provides, family members can come, on birthdays or Mother's Day or whatever and put some flowers out there. But by allowing, family members to continue to bury other people, I think is, it's going a lot further than what the original laws require. So I'm just kind of wondering what the justification for that is.
Sure. So, Mr. Chair, what I would suggest on that is that if it's the will of the committee on that, we can certainly put a time limit on it, basically in terms of, since the last property, since basically the property was sold, for example. So if your family, you've owned a property for blank number of decades, whatever, then, basically we could put some sort of time limit on that. I would be amenable to it. But at the same time, we're talking about in my district in Western Prince William, you're talking about sales that happened, in recent years. And, where we've got existing family members here, as the case of Frank Washington, who literally grew up in the area that had been sold, who was able to take me on a tour of the property and show parcel by parcel, like this is where there was burials, there's where there's burials, and this is an area that was cleared out to put up crops over it instead that they no longer have access to, for example. So, if we can come to a compromise on that, I think we'd be in good shape.
Any of the other members have a question? Take some testimony from the audience. Yes, sir.
Good afternoon. My name is Frank Washington, and I'm from the Coalition to Save Historic Thoroughfare. The need for establishing a process for interment rights through utilizing official and non-official documents is imperative to protecting the rights of family cemeteries that have been in use for decades. Preserving and maintaining these rights today and for future generations. In Thoroughfare, we, including our church, were recently threatened with being sued if we continue to bury in our family cemetery, which has been in use since the 1800s. This is still an active cemetery. Our access to this cemetery of my ancestors, which holds slave, free slave, and Native Americans, was also suddenly blocked with a gate and a boulder without warning. Again, I stress that these are not abandoned cemeteries. These are cemeteries that are still in use and have been in use for decades. Thank you.
Can I ask you a question, sir? I mean, when you say in use, what do you mean by that?
We're still burying family members in the cemetery itself. The last burial, I believe, was 4 years ago.
Thank you.
Yes, sir.
Mr. Chair.
Delegate Runyon.
I guess a question, and I'm not quite sure who to address it to, but who owns this property?
That's an extending issue because that's part of the problem. Because a lot of these cemeteries are heir properties handed down. The documentation is not always as it is because we were not afforded the same type of documentation for that time frame, just because that's the way things were at that time. So what happens over a period of time, for us, for example, we have people come in and purchase land without us even knowing it because we did not have notification of that. So after the fact, then we had to run around and try to understand how this happened without our knowledge. For example, the cemetery that I told you that was blocked to our access. I had just been there a few days ago preparing for my aunt to be buried. Everything was fine. We had no inkling that there was an issue whatsoever. I come in the following day, and suddenly there's a gate, there's a boulder, and I receive a phone call from an attorney stating that we could no longer bury people in this cemetery, and it was no longer ours. No explanation as how we lost the cemetery, how someone else is claiming ownership of the cemetery, and those are the questions we're trying to get answered as of now.
Mr. Chair, follow up. So this is properties that someone, the church or whoever was running the cemetery didn't have a tax ticket on it or any type of documentation that this property was ever owned?
All of this land that we're speaking of was actually owned by my family. We have owned it since the late 1800s. Pieces of it because they were brothers and sisters. They are handed down parcels, and so as one dies off, of course, they're handed down to brothers or sisters or children of that nature. This particular cemetery, as I said, the land adjacent to it, we had no idea that it had ever been sold to anyone whatsoever, and we had no idea that the cemetery, which we've been using, was even attached to that particular land. Again, because of the lack of records for this type of situation, it's hard to go back and find out exactly how it was sold, who gave the permission to sell it, who the county is actually contacting before they make these sales. So again, it's what we're trying to understand and sort through now. But the family has owned the property in this entire area for decades.
Mr. Chair. Sure. So one suggestion I might have then is if there are living descendants so basically immediate living descendants, like say someone's child, right, of a parent who's buried there, maybe if that's the time frame that you're looking for, is still like people are still alive based on family immediacy. But if you're looking to have a cutoff at some point of a generation of one or two generations removed, more or less, after a blank number of years, that would certainly be something that we would work with that would resolve the problem we have while at the same time protecting your property as well.
I know that sometimes some divisions of land, sometimes there's a real hard time finding clear title on some of these things, and I understand that. We run into that in Hanover County, occasionally. But the problem with, I think, this bill, though, is that it's going to cover every landowner, and so what we kind of have here is, I would call it like a taking, where, what we're trying to do, where you could come in and use somebody's property to bury somebody that's titled, it belongs to somebody else. You see what I'm saying? And it's,
Mr. Chair, I would also.
So, I don't know if there's a way around this, but there's no getting around that, because the landowner obviously has clear title. He owns it. He or she's paying taxes on it, and you see what I'm saying? And in my situation, I would kind of resist somebody doing this on property that I own.
Sure. So, Mr. Chair, one of the things I would also note is that in Section C of the bill, for example, where you would still basically have, the private property owner in this case may designate reasonable limitations with regard to access and usage of the property for interment of the deceased person. We included that specifically to make sure that private property owners do actually have a say in basically in the proceedings there, and to make sure that whatever happens is within reason. And at the same time, I think that for a place where no one's been using the cemetery, no one's been coming to visit or anything like that for a long time.
Again, current law already allows for access,
right?
But just no more planting. But anyway, it's
we still have more people
yep. Yes, sir.
My name is Curtis Hansen. I am a part of the Coalition to Save Historic Thoroughfare. I'm also the spokesperson for American Indian Movement of the East Coast. The thing that brings me here today is to get this bill passed so that these atrocities that happened in Thoroughfare do not ever happen again. The dignity that these folks in Thoroughfare endured from developers putting dignity behind dollars, and that has to stop. And this bill is the start to get that passed and going forward. I live in the country also with a small cemetery. And if you think about it, you're saying there's people in there 100 years old. Well, unless their family members are there, they usually don't want to be buried there. They want to be buried in their church or wherever they worshiped. But the families that have been on that property for their entire lives, that want to bury their family on the ground that has supported them. And the thing of it is, it's dignity to do the right thing and pass this bill. They're humans, and humans deserve respect. Thank you.
Mr. Chairman, I have a question for the gentleman. Sir?
Yes, sir.
I have a question for you.
Sir, please.
So, currently, let's say a family owned property for 200 years. We have property in our family that we've owned for 200 years. And let's say due to some unfortunate circumstance, we lost that property and a grandparent was still living. And that grandparent passed away and wanted to be buried in that cemetery. So I'm assuming under the current law, if the property owner decided that that grandparent couldn't be buried in that cemetery, then they wouldn't be allowed to. Is that correct?
That is correct.
Thank you.
And what's happened is it's the developers that come in that value that ground more than the hallowed ground that it is. In Thoroughfare, they mowed the whole damn cemetery down. 100 graves that were documented. And the trees. The Indian way of thinking about the trees is, if Grandpa's planted underneath that tree is part of your family because that tree gained the nourishments from Grandpa's grave being there.
All right, thanks, sir. All right. Anybody else? Okay. Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. My name is Harvey Jones, and I'm here in support of the bill. My connection to Thoroughfare is that my father and grandfather lived there. My father was born there in the 1900s. And obviously you know somewhat about what has taken place in Thoroughfare. Virginia and its history is very unique. There's family cemeteries all over the state of Virginia in backyards. As you said, your family has one. And the problem is that there is not any uniformity in applying the laws to protect family and family heritage. In the case of Thoroughfare, it's not an imaginary community. You have families that still live there. The church is still there, and it has a very, very unique history that's important to the state. And we're supporting this legislation because it will correct and it will make sure that this problem does not exist, not just in Thoroughfare, but throughout the state of Virginia, and it will protect the heritage of all families.
All right, thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Thank you. Yes, sir.
Mr. Chairman, members of the committee, Jeff Caruso with the Virginia Catholic Conference. I would like to thank the patron for working with us when what we wanted to discuss regarding the bill. We very much support the objectives as mentioned by the patron, as mentioned by the people that testified. We did raise one issue, which was that from the vantage point of church cemeteries, which are often very small, sometimes we may not be able, just space-wise, to be able to accommodate family members and descendants to be interred. There may not be space for that on an indefinite basis. So the amendment that you have before you was to, in addressing our concerns, and we think with the adoption of that amendment, that strikes a very good balance between these very good objectives of the bill, as well as the interest that we raised. Thank you very much.
All right, thank you. Delegate Rome, you have a last word?
Sure, Mr. Chair. So I guess if it's okay, Mr. Chair, if we could engage just maybe a bit of dialogue in just terms of where the committee's at right now, and seeing if we can just come to some agreement that's going to allow me to take care of my constituents over here, while at the same time addressing the concerns that you have.
Well, thank you. I think we'll probably come to something here in a minute. But anyway, I guess if we're done here, the chair will entertain a motion.
Mr. Chairman.
Delegate Wright.
Motion to lay the bill on the table.
Substitute motion.
Substitute motion.
Move the bill forward.
Move the to report.
Can't do that. And the table takes precedence unless there was no second.
Yep.
Was there a second to the table?
Was there a second on laying on the table? Is there a second? No, no second. So.
Then you can.
Move to report.
Move to report. Is there a second?
Second.
All right, we have a motion to report in a second.
I'm speaking to the bill.
Speak to the bill. Delegate Wright.
I'll read this correctly. If you own a piece of property and have a cemetery located on it, then any person that's a family member or descendant of the deceased person buried in that cemetery may petition the circuit court for interment rights. Where's the private property rights? It's for the women. You would take your home place, the place you say you own for 200 years, and so you own it exclusive for 200 years. And it happens to be a small grave site on there. And then it doesn't say how many people could be buried. You can be constantly having people coming on there being buried on your own property. It's not really saying anything to me. I think it's fair. You've got a grave, a cemetery that people have access to, and that's already in the law. But to say that a person can be buried because the cemetery happens to be on property, you open all kinds of legal questions.
So that's my comment. My motion is wasn't seconded, so you got a proper motion before you.
Mr. Chairman.
You know what you're doing.
Mr. Chairman.
Final word. We got a motion and a second. Somebody else will speak on the bill.
I was just going to make a comment in response to Delegate Wright's comment. I'm assuming that most cemeteries are defined, whether they're on a deed, and in this case they may not be, but just visually speaking, I know that if I'm on a large tract of property, cemeteries that have grave markings or tombstones, there's a geographic area of where that cemetery is located. Now, often older graves, Native Americans and so forth, it's impossible to identify that. But I think more modern graves, there is a defined area, whether legally in a deed or just by simply looking at it. And I think the comment about burying people all over the property, I just don't see a court upholding that. I think that a judge would look at each individual case and say, we have a very small defined area that is a cemetery, not the entire property or a larger area. So that's just my opinion.
All right. Members shall cast their vote on the electronic voting device. Close the roll. The bill fails to report on a vote of 4-4.
All right, thank you, Mr. Chair. I have HB 615.
615. Let me see. House Bill 615, Delegate Rome.
All right, thank you, Mr. Chairman. To the members of the subcommittee, before you is HB 615, which would require a good faith effort by a county or city to contact the family or descendants of the original owner of a cemetery before such property is put up for sale. Localities will be required to document their attempts to contact the original owners, which includes methods by phone calls, mail, and in-person visits to last known addresses of record. This provides flexible options and will help the locality by having a written record of when they have contacted the family members and be able to prove this information when confronted by family members or the public. This bill is the product of a constituent service request from my district, and you'll have some of the same folks who were just testifying on the last bill who will speak to this one as well. Families deserve notification about the potential transfer of ownership of the cemeteries their relatives or ancestors are buried in. And with that, Mr. Chair, I have to take any questions.
Thank you, Delegate Rome. Any of the members have a question for the patron? Any members in the audience care to speak in favor or against? Thank you, sir.
Good afternoon again. My name is Frank Washington. An extending issue is the need for expanding requirements for notice to descendants in advance of public sales. 3 of my family cemeteries suffered threats, and one completely bulldozed in part due to the fact that the descendants were not afforded proper notification. I watched as people danced and partied around my bulldozed family cemetery and then watched them hold a 4th of July fireworks celebration directly over the bodies lying beneath their feet. This bill before you will aid families and helping our families and communities preserve cemetery rights through an informed, required process. A governmental duty of care should exist within the laws and codes that are meant to protect our cemeteries and the rights of people. However, many times this duty and responsibility are breached because cemetery laws contain loopholes. This leads to a common occurrence in attacks on cemeteries in many forms, due to the fact that historically these laws did not always take into account that people of color were not afforded proper documentation of cemeteries and of burials. This places these very people at a disadvantage when it comes to the current requirements regarding notification and sales. Establishing and expanding this bill will help ease and hopefully begin to eradicate the emotional injury and suffering that many families endure because there are not solid guidelines in the current codes and laws, a pain I and my family have experienced firsthand. Our cemeteries are vital links between the living, dead, and our collective history.
All right. Thank you, Mr. Washington. Anybody have any questions for the witness? Anybody else like to speak in favor of the bill? Yes, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. My name is Harvey Jones. I support the bill because it provides uniformity and it strengthens the code. I think what we have here is a situation where there's not just loopholes, but gray areas right now in the code, which allow for the lack of proper interpretation of what the intent of the code is. And this bill will, I think, correct that measure and protect, again, the cemeteries. So I thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Jones. Yes, ma'am.
Mr. Chairman and members, my name is Sheila Hansen. I'm Shenandoah Shawnee. I'm also the founder of the United Tribes of the Shenandoah. I'm a neighbor of Thoroughfare. I'm a part of the Coalition to Save Historic Thoroughfare. We need this bill badly. If this bill had been enforced at the time these cemeteries were sold, maybe we wouldn't have to be here today. We would have answers. The most important part of this bill is the last line that says, a county or city shall keep written records of each attempt to contact a family member or descendant of the cemetery's last owner of record. We don't have that for Thoroughfare. We don't know who they contacted, when they contacted, how long it was contacted. We just know that these cemeteries were sold. The excuse was they were sold for back taxes, and if you look at the Code of Virginia, cemeteries aren't taxed. And that's another questionable thing. We need this bill. We need it so that the next village, the next people don't have this problem. So please pass this bill and help the people of Thoroughfare and their ancestors. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you for your testimony. Yes, sir.
My name is Curtis Hansen. It's kind of embarrassing sometimes when people of wealth see a community of color as invisible and Indian people as invisible. I'm ashamed of the last vote, but this bill has got to pass. You've got to stop it, my friend. You have to stop this. As the developers come, they go on, and the dollar means more. And they might come to your farm. And then your relatives just get pushed under. It's got to stop.
Thank you, sir. I believe we already heard his testimony. Delegate Rome, do you have any last words?
No, Mr. Chair, I'm open for any debate or discussion, amendments, or whatever you have in mind.
Mr. Chair,
Delegate Runyon.
Question of the patron. And I apologize for not knowing about Thoroughfare. I did a real quick Google search there a minute ago and read real quickly about that. But in the bill, in this particular, it talks about municipal-owned cemeteries only. Is that right?
No, so this one actually, because it also says county or city, you're inherently dealing with localities as a whole. So basically, it's not just municipalities, it would also be regarding the county.
So, but if it's a privately owned piece of property, then this doesn't apply? Or
That's
doesn't?
correct. This says no cemetery owned by a county or city shall be sold.
Okay, and was that the case in this circumstance?
No, so in this, so what happened in this particular case regarding Thoroughfare is that the county, in this case in Prince William County, they had more or less taken the land here due to lack of payment, whatever it was, right? And they put it up for public auction.
Gotcha.
And so when that happens, this is the idea that where we're trying to apply it. So the bill, in general, it's made to be narrowly scoped in this regard. And it's also meant to basically prevent what happened in Thoroughfare. Because if I can just give you a very brief, just backstory on this, what happened was that sort of property that we're dealing with here, when that was purchased, and you heard about the cemetery that was completely bulldozed over. There's a number of other Potter's Fields and actually very well-established cemeteries very nearby that as well. And so in different parcels being put up for different auction at different times for different folks, this would create some uniformity with it. Prince William County purchased about 2.2 acres of this area about 2 months ago, maybe? Yeah, about 2 months ago. And they're going to turn that into a park, which is nice. That's going to preserve some of it. But not all of these properties are being preserved within that park. The county's still going to try to negotiate a way, seeing if they could purchase some of the other cemetery areas. But in the meantime, the heart and soul of this bill is learning from our mistakes. That's really, I think, what we're trying to get at here.
All right, thank you. Thank you. All right, the chair will entertain a motion.
Mr. Chairman.
Yes, sir.
Speaking to the bill. Mr. Chairman, this situation in itself is not unique for black and brown people. It's not unique, and it's not unique. I myself, my family, we have no recorded record of cemetery plots, but we do have a family plot. And the only record we have is what's written down in the Bible. You can open the Bible, you can see who died and where they are and all, So this here seeks to inform those family members and keep them aware of what's going on. So I think it's the right thing to do to move this bill forward. So with that, I will make a motion that we report this bill.
Second.
Mr. Chair.
A motion and a second. Delegate Runyon.
Yeah, I had asked to speak.
I defer to the
All right,
delegate.
Delegate Wright. You have the floor, Delegate Wright. Tommy.
Okay. I have sympathy for the remarks I've heard here today, but what is being done is trying to remedy a local situation by making something apply to everybody. And I just don't see, again, the private property rights of people are being disabused. And I've heard about thoroughfare. I never had heard of thoroughfare before. And I didn't know what really was the discussion was on that. But I know, for instance, if you try to buy a piece of property, a lot of times you can't even find who all the people who have an interest in that property are. And you're putting the burden on the localities, and it says you must use 2 different contact methods. If this was something that was just for, say, the area that has been affected, and I'm sure some areas are, I never had heard of this before, but we're putting every locality that has a cemetery in a position where they can't sell it unless they go by this list of guidelines here. And I just don't even see how it could be constitutional, but I certainly would be opposed to it. I think a motion's already been made, and so I'm not going to make another motion, but I'll just say that I think this is not an issue for this General Assembly to settle. We represent all localities, and we can't carve out an exception for one locality, which may be very well intended, but make it apply to everybody.
So, Mr. Chairman.
Delegate Rome.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Chairman, I know a motion's been made and seconded, so one of the members I know would have to amend the motion in order to do this. But if in order to address the delegate's concern, if we wanted to, we could simply say Planning District 8, county executive form of government. In that case, it would only apply to Prince William.
Thank you. Let me get what Delegate Runyon had a statement. Delegate Runyon.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And I'd like to say that I'm very sympathetic to this. And Delegate Jenkins commented, my family has the same circumstances. And so what's perhaps different is the one that I'm aware of, there's a deed, it's recorded in the deed. And so I'm sitting here thinking, and so I very much understand the issue. I frankly don't share Delegate Wright's concern about this one, and I can go either direction, whether it be statewide or we limit to Planning District 8. I'm ambivalent to that. But I think these are municipal-owned government-owned cemeteries. I'm fine with that. What I would like to say is I think this overall issue probably should have some additional consideration and conversation so that we can get past some of the issues the various delegates have expressed on both sides. And I just wanted to make sure the audience, those folks that are proponents of this, understand that at least for me, I'm very, very sympathetic. And the reason I voted the way I did on the previous bill was because I didn't think we were quite where we needed to be to address all the concerns. But that being said, Mr. Chair, I intend on vote positive on this particular motion.
Mr. Chairman.
Delegate Wright.
I've got a substitute motion. I move this be referred to the Courts Committee where it could be more properly examined as far as the legality of what we're considering doing. I don't think it's an issue that belongs really before this committee.
I think the motion,
It's not a proper motion.
I think the motion to report takes precedence over your motion, Delegate Wright. And so at this point, we've got a proper motion before us, duly seconded, and members shall cast their vote on the electronic voting machine. Close roll. The bill reports out 7-1.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And Mr. Chair, if any members of the sub before full committee wish to talk to me about this, I'd be happy to speak to anyone about it. Thank you, sir.
Delegate Tran.
Good afternoon, Mr. Chair and members of the committee. I have two bills before you. Do you have a preference for which to proceed with or no? I'm sorry?
How about 10-20?
10-20. All right. 1 second, please. Okay. Okay. I'm ready when you are, Mr. Chair.
You have the floor.
Thank you. We have all seen and experienced how technology has allowed for successful telework, both across our state agencies as well as the private sector. As we recover from the pandemic, we hear more and more about employers that are rethinking their timeline for returning to in-person work and instead considering virtual-only or hybrid models. This includes small businesses as well as major international companies. As the state government and our private sector are updating their telework policies, we want to make sure that no one is left behind, including people with disabilities. I hope we're all familiar with some of the challenges that people with disabilities face in the workforce. For example, the community has a really high unemployment rate. In 2020, the unemployment rate for people with disabilities was 12.6% compared to 7.9% for people without a disability. HB 1020 will help make sure that telework policies are inclusive. It does the following. It specifies that it's an unlawful discriminatory practice for a state agency to refuse an otherwise qualified person with a disability to telecommute or participate in alternative work schedules as a reasonable form of accommodation in accordance with the Americans with Disabilities Act. It requires state agencies to set targets for positions eligible for telework and alternative work positions, track how they're meeting those goals, and then also track how people with disabilities who have telework as an accommodation, how many of those employees we have across the state. It helps to identify and disseminate model inclusive telework practices at a time when the private sector is reevaluating overall workforce practices because of COVID, and helps to so that's it. So as we emerge from this pandemic, I want to make sure we don't leave people with disabilities behind. There are people who want to work and are qualified to work, and so I hope that we're creating a more inclusive work environment for everybody. Thank you, and I look forward to your questions.
All right. Thank you, Delegate Tran. Do any of the members have a question for the patron? I don't hear any. So anyway, any final words, Delegate Tran?
I think we were having somebody
We have
who might be
some-
testifying virtually.
Do we have somebody in the queue?
Yes, we do.
Ms. Nichols, we look forward to hearing from you.
Thank you. I want to tell you just a little bit so you understand the background of this bill. If you work for a state agency, you can be denied basically handicap parking. I have had such things as they used handicap parking to put all the snow piles in for everybody to get out. I have had issues where it's shoved right next to it, so if you try to get out of the car and you're handicapped, you're not able to drop a ramp, or you walk with a cane or some other such issue, you're going to be put right out in black ice. We've also had an issue where it was told to me that handicap bathrooms were put there because they were required to, but they're not for us. So what would happen is if somebody who is able-bodied, and this has happened a number of times, has actually used those bathrooms because they like the bigger stalls, you have to go all the way to the other end of the building to use the bathroom. And this is pretty hard on handicapped people. So just these issues alone, just small daily things like that, the ability to work from home is a godsend. And let me tell you something, how much of a difference that it makes. You're talking, in my case, I am actually at work more, less sick, 90% of the time. My amount of time actually taking sick leave has dropped by 90% from being able to work from home during the pandemic. That's what you get out of a worker. So I hope that you can see just one instance of how well this bill would actually impact. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Ms. Nichols. Delegate Tran.
I appreciate Ms. Nichols for joining us. And I think looking at the queue, I just want to note that the Virginia Association for People Supporting Employment First focuses on helping individuals with disabilities be able to compete in our workforce. Was unable to join this afternoon, and they support the bill, though.
All right. Any questions from the committee? Any questions from the committee? All right. Chair will entertain a motion.
Move to report.
Motion
Chairman.
to report.
Mr. Chairman.
Yep.
I've
Delegate
got a
Moorfield.
question. This maybe for staff, maybe somebody knows the answer to this, but what is the correct state agency that would deal with human resource related issues in the Commonwealth? DHRN?
Mr. Chairman, as far as if I'm getting to what you're asking, it would be DHRM.
Okay. Mr. Chairman, follow-up question.
Delegate Moorfield.
Have you been in communication with DHRM?
We have received some technical input from DHRM, and as you know, they are not taking positions on the bill. They did clarify to us the work that DHRM is doing around state agency telework policies and shared some data in terms of the number of people who've been teleworking pre and post-COVID. I do believe that our state policies are aligned with the Americans with Disabilities Act, but the way the code is written, for example, there's a piece, for example, we just want to make sure that we're clear that telework and alternative work schedules, if it's agreed to as a reasonable accommodation, is entitled under the Americans with Disabilities Act. So we're fine-tuning the law, but they haven't come out and said that we're, moving in an entirely wrong direction for the state.
Mr. Chairman?
Yes, sir.
I'd like to make a comment just from a brief conversation with some of my colleagues on the committee. I think there's a general consensus from the majority that we're a little uncomfortable moving this bill forward. I think we would like to learn a little more about it and maybe get some more feedback from the appropriate agency. And so if there's, instead of just making a motion and acting on the bill today, if you would like maybe to give us a few days, if that's the will of the committee, for us to get a little more information before we act on that.
Delegate Moorfield, we had a motion here, but it was not seconded. So, I mean, what is their posture right now? George.
Well, we have a motion with a second, so it's still in front of the.
Okay, so we have a motion and to report and a second, so.
Oh, did we get a second? No,
We
without a
did not,
second,
so we're
it's
doing
still
that in a
before.
second, so,
Bill fails.
Well, unless you want to pass it by. That's,
Yep.
that's what Moorfield suggested.
I have can I make a substitute motion to pass the bill by for the day?
all right, got a, yep, pass it by, seconded. All those in favor say, no, not say, but indicate their vote on the,
Voice.
oh, excuse me, voice votes. All those in favor say aye. Aye. All opposed? All right, the bill's passed by for the day.
Mr. Chairman.
Just 1 second, Delegate Moorfield, Delegate Tran, will you, Delegate Carr has to fly out of here real quick. Will you let her present her bill real quick, and then we'll get back to you?
Sure.
Thank you.
Mr.
Delegate
Chairman, one
Moorfield.
comment. If Delegate Tran, if you could please reach out to DHRM and have them at the next meeting?
Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, great.
All right,
Thank you.
just all right, Delegate Carr.
I have before you House Bill 644, and there is an amendment in the nature of a substitute. Mr. Chairman, members of the committee, HB, we ready to go?
Yeah.
Move to,
Oh, okay, we have a substitute before us. All those in favor of adopting the substitute, please say aye. All opposed?
a substitute.
Yeah, aye.
Hey, wake up. All right, the substitute's before us. Delegate Carr.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. HB 644 resolves an inconsistency in the current code regarding the timing of when DGS may proceed to sell surplus property. Currently, DGS is required to proceed with selling surplus property within 120 days of receiving a report from the Secretary of Natural Resources about the property. However, another section of the code requires DGS to give localities at least 180 days to decide if they wish to purchase the property before DGS can proceed with selling the property. These two time periods are in conflict, and the bill resolves the conflict by requiring DGS to proceed with selling surplus property after giving localities 180 days to consider purchasing the property. The bill also allows DGS to work with the owners of the land that is adjacent to surplus property to adjust boundary lines and grant easements to facilitate the sale. These actions are subject to written approval of the governor. Finally, the bill streamlines the advertising process by requiring the advertisement of the property in one newspaper that is circulated in the locality in which the surplus property is, as well as posting the property on the DGS website. Representative Sandra Gill is here from DGS, and she's here to speak to the bill.
All right, thank you, Delegate Carr.
Good afternoon, Mr. Chair, members of the committee, Sandra Gill, DGS. We want to thank Delegate Carr for carrying our bill for us that helps the process with surplus property. As Delegate Carr, she did a great job outlining the changes that the bill accomplishes, but I'm here to answer any questions if you have them.
All right, thank you. Any questions for the witness?
Mr. Chairman,
Delegate
I apologize. I couldn't hear you who you said you were with.
Sandra Gill, Department of General Services.
Okay, thank you.
I work for Joe D'Amico.
Any other questions? Any other questions for the witness? All right, Delegate Carr. Any final words?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I hope the committee will look favorably on this simple bill.
All right, we have a motion to report. Second. Delegate Jenkins, let's see, is a second. We've already got the substitutes been adopted, so the bill as amended. All those in favor of reporting bill indicate their vote on the electronic voting machine. Close the roll. The bill reports 8-0. Great job, Delegate Carr.
Thank you.
Delegate Tran.
Thank you.
And I just want to thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank Delegate Tran for her indulgence.
Mr. Chair, I am back. with House Bill 1049.
House Bill 1.
Proceed, Delegate Tran.
Okay, thank you so much. House Bill 1049 deals with language access across our state government. Every Virginian, regardless of their proficiency in English, deserves to have the information and the resources that Virginia provides if they're eligible for those resources. But general information, most definitely having that access. I think the COVID pandemic has shown that we're just not at that point where everybody has equal access. We do not have a common policy or framework to improve language access across the state government. So therefore, access to Virginians with limited English proficiency is very uneven. Some state agencies use Google Translate to translate their materials. These errors were especially on display when one of the departments, Virginia Department of Health, used Google Translate to translate vaccine information into Spanish, and the translation for the vaccine is not required became the vaccine is not necessary. So just some small mistranslated words, but has a big impact in the meaning. I'm sure you've heard of the cases at the Virginia Employment Commission where there were Virginians who were calling in about their unemployment insurance claim. But if you didn't speak English or Spanish, at the beginning of the pandemic, the call center line hung up on you when you pressed the number for other language. These are just a few mistakes, but they illustrate how language access can create a life or death situation or increase financial stress for Virginians with limited English proficiency. The 2019 census data shows that in Virginia, the majority of limited English proficient Virginians are Spanish speakers, but a significant portion speak Asian languages, are Asian American or Pacific Islander. So recognizing the need to understand and address this issue, the General Assembly included budget amendments both in the 21 regular session and the ARPA session to look at language access across our state agencies and make some recommendations. And House Bill 1049 reflects some of those recommendations. It requires each agency to designate a language access coordinator. That person will be responsible for developing and implementing their agency's language access policies. And it requires the Secretary of Administration to establish procurement criteria for language translation and interpretation so that it's even across the agencies. And also there's some state employees, just by virtue of the skills that they have, they're actually asked to translate and interpret as part of their jobs. So trying to figure out, is that fair and what we should do around compensation for them. And then it creates a language access work group that would be charged with establishing model language policies for state agencies. In 2004, JLARC completed a study called Acclimation of Virginia's Foreign-Born Population, and it included recommendations on advancing language access. In the 17 years since then, there's been no action on those recommendations. So we're really grateful for this updated study. We hope that this will be the year we're able to take some steps to address this critical issue for so many Virginians. Thank you.
Thank you, Delegate Tran. Does any of the members have a question for the patron? I will tell you that we have had a request that this bill will need to go upstairs. And so, any of the questions, I'll entertain a motion. Delegate Moorfield.
Mr. Chairman, I have a motion to report and refer to appropriations.
Second.
All right, we have a motion and a second. All right, all those in favor of report and refer indicate their vote on the electronic voting machine. All right, you can close the rolls. And the bill report and refer by a vote of 5-2. Thank you, Delegate Tran.
Thank you so much, Mr. Chair. And there might be some folks online who wanted to say that they support.
I'm sorry, jeez.
I think I'll take my win, but we do have a fact sheet. You can tell there are like a lot of organizations across Virginia that support this work. So thank you very much.
I apologize to the person in the queue, but the good news is the bill passed. And so thank you, Delegate Tran. Thank the committee. We're adjourned. All right. Come here and hang around with me longer, Tommy.